Health Watch, some major medical groups are issuing a call to action with a nationwide warning that vaccination rates are considerably low for adolescents and teenagers. Sukanya Krishnan has more.
15-year-old Andrew Stemberger is here for his well visit. His dad, Alan, makes sure he sees a pediatrician once a year.
My job as a parent is to keep them as healthy and protected as possible.
Let's talk about vaccines.
Andrew isn't due for any shots today. Next year, when he turns 16, a few are recommended, but vaccination rates remain low for adolescents. That's why several leading medical groups are urging to establish a 16-year-old immunization visit. Dr. Jay Berger is the chief medical officer at Pro Healthcare in New York.
It gives the opportunity for the pediatrician and the families to sit down and review the vaccine schedule and find if there are any holes.
Among the vaccines teens can get at that visit, the second dose of the meningitis vaccine that protects against A, C, Y, and W strains, the meningitis B vaccine, and the flu vaccine depending on the time of year.
In addition, our teenage vaccines include the human papillomavirus, HPV vaccine, which we give usually starting at 11, but sometimes we catch up or start it later in the teen years.
Data shows only 44% of kids complete the meningitis vaccine by their 18th birthday. Only 49% of adolescents have received the full HPV series.
You already got your HPV vaccines.
Alan says his son will continue to get his vaccines as recommended.
Because if he doesn't, then he falls behind and he goes to college, and then you're never going to see him. Making sure he's prepped up for the future is important.
They will be back next year right on schedule. Sukanya Krishnan, CBS News, New York.
Flu season is approaching and fast, and studies show that less than half of teenagers between the ages of 13 and 17 years old receive the flu vaccine. 2 more people have died from vaping-related illnesses, this time in Minnesota. This brings the nationwide toll to 31 deaths across 22 states. While both the CDC and the FDA have issued warnings for people to avoid vaping, the cause of the deaths and more than 1,100 injuries remain unknown. So culture writer EJ Dickson wrote this fascinating article. There's not just one vaping crisis, there's 3. She joins me now in the studio to talk about this. So it's an interesting title because you don't necessarily mean there are 3 vaping crises, but there's sort of 3 ways, 3 angles to approach this crisis. So explain that to me.
Sure. So yeah, basically what's happening is that there are 3 things going on right now that sort of the FDA and the CDC and doctors are all conflating. The first is the vaping epidemic that we're talking about, you know, the one that has claimed 31 lives as of this morning. And the second is the youth vaping crisis, which is a totally separate thing. This is what you hear with all the headlines with Juul facing all this litigation. Youth vaping is on the uptick. I think it's a 78% increase in the last year. So it's a major concern. I mean, teenagers are vaping in record numbers, but it's a separate concern from the first bigger health crisis. And the third is just that there's a lot of uncertainty when it relates to vaping. Like, we just don't know what the long-term effects are. So all 3 of those things together are worth considering when we talk about this.
So the question that I had been asking myself when we were talking about this is, why do we not see the same vaping crisis happening in other countries, like Canada, like the UK, that sell pretty much the same products? The CDC has been all over this, and they don't seem to be making any headway at all. Is it your opinion that maybe they're looking in the wrong place, or what do you think the deal is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a really good question. It's a question that a lot of vaping consumer advocates that I've talked to have brought up. This is not happening in the UK, you know, and vaping happens, you know, the rates are about the same in the UK. My opinion, just in the reporting that I've done, is that the CDC is sort of overstating the role that you know, traditional nicotine e-cigarettes are playing in this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We don't know the specific numbers, but as far as we do know, the vast majority of the cases have implicated THC black market cartridges.
Right.
So
because a lot of municipalities have sort of felt the need to jump ahead of the CDC, and like here in New York and some other places, they've gone about banning the flavored liquids that are used. I think at least in one state they banned vaping altogether or put a hold on it. Right, Massachusetts is it? Right. So yeah, the states seem to be focusing on mainstream regular vaping products, but you say maybe that's misguided.
Yeah, I think it's a misunderstanding of what the culprit might be and what the issues at play here are.
Yeah.
And I think it really is a conflation of the three train tracks that the three different crises that we were talking about before.
So you've got these black market products, right? But also vaping's been around for like 12 years. So is there a possibility that this is also sort of the byproduct of just long-term use, that now we're finally seeing what happens after, you know, a dozen years of vaping?
It certainly is a possibility, and I've spoken with medical experts who have basically said as much, you know, that it could be that there are some people in the population who are susceptible to developing these type of lung ailments, and that we're just sort of seeing the effects of it now. But considering how fast this has happened, I mean, if that is the case, then I think it's probably playing a relatively small role.
I think when people think, so you brought up youth vaping, so I want to ask you about that. When people think about, you know, teens vaping, I think they compare it to teen smoking. Like say, you know, a few years ago, or maybe a couple decades ago, when sort of it was cool to sneak out of class and smoke. But teens don't smoke the way that they vape. They can vape more frequently than they would sort of a regular traditional cigarette, right? Yeah. And is that part of the problem?
I think so. I think the fact that vaping is more discreet is part of the problem. I've spoken with a lot of teenagers who have said, you know, it just looks like a USB. Like I can just bring it into class and the teacher won't even know what's going on. And I think that Juul and similar companies also, you know, carry a lot of blame in this because, I mean, their marketing tactics have been geared toward, as much as they deny it, you know, they have been geared towards teenagers by introducing flavors, by, you know, recruiting prominent Instagram influencers to promote their products. So I think it's a conflation of different factors.
EJ, it's a really well-written article. I actually urge, you know, if your parents or if you're a vaping person, if somebody who vapes, you should check out the article because I love the way it's laid out because this is such a confusing topic and you literally have question, answer, so it's really easy to understand. I appreciate it, EJ.
Thank you so much.